I'm always excited to have a podcast that comes from a conversation on Facebook or from one of my beautiful community. So please let me know anytime there's a topic you would love discussed. This week's podcast is about medication, and the post I put on Facebook was medication! This is always a hard topic for everyone, but I'd love people to share their actual experiences of what medication you used, if it worked, how long it took to work. No, it's a hard topic, but I'd love people to share and support others. As a teacher, I've seen both the positives and negatives, and I know how tricky it can be to find the right medication. So I would highly recommend you actually go to the blog for this week and have a look, because I've got a whole lot of screenshots of what people shared, what people liked, because this is a way for me to collate the hundreds of responses that we had. But then I actually put up a post asking, is anyone happy to come on and share their experiences on the podcast? And I was so lucky. I had lots of people offer, which was amazing and why I love our community. But I chose to just get a bit of variety. So I chose to have a mum come on who has a girl and a boy on the spectrum, but she's sharing her daughter's experience. But what I love about what Naomi shares, she also shares about how her husband was very resistant. And you're going to get some strategies around what you do if you're both not on the same page. And I thought that it was very sensitive and beautiful the way she shared. She's also a teacher, so she shared her experience about in the classroom too. And often when we're asked to observe children or our opinion, and it's so hard, we're not doctors. If any of you are interested in understanding more about medication, many of you have my book, The Ultimate Guide to School and Home. And on page 129 and 130, some really helpful hints around different medications, what they help with. You'll hear a lot of these names in the podcast interviews that I do or conversations, some side effects, also some natural remedies, as well as I'm a big fan of keeping a medication diary, how to do that. And the reason for that is often it's like that frog in water, that it's slow boil. You don't notice the changes dramatically, even though some people in this podcast did notice a dramatic difference. Sometimes it's a slow change. And also I think it's worth documenting, because if the medication goes a little bit off, you remember the changes from last time. Look, I'm a big voice memo girl now. You don't have to write it down. It can just be a quick voice memo to yourself or quick text to the parent and they can record it. You know, there's lots of ways to do that. And I really like when Naomi shares about having that team for around medication. I think that's really, really important. So we have Naomi sharing, and then we have Nikki sharing, who shares about her son's experience, and really, really, really helpful. And also he's just started high school and just what to do if he forgets his medication and that whole transition to getting children to look after their own medication. But what I love about both of these, they share the journey of going on medication, how it took a while to get right, what were the signs they were looking for. So I think it doesn't matter why you listen to this podcast. It's a really helpful podcast to think about medication, your own experiences. And then a third little bonus is I was talking to Chris for a podcast on social skills and teenagers and so forth. And we turned off the podcast and then the recording, and then we were just chatting and we're having quite a long chat. She started talking about medication and I'm like, stop. I'm doing a podcast on medication. Can I just record this in case it's helpful and I can use it? And I think it's really helpful. So very exciting. You've actually got 3 different parents sharing their perspectives. And I think it's really helpful to hear everyone's ideas around medication. So it is a bit of a longer podcast, but I hope that you get a lot of value out of this. And I highly recommend, if you're looking for more tips and ideas on how different medication. Now, just so you know, I didn't ask them their opinions in advance. I didn't know if they were going to be for or against. So just so you know, they were all supportive, but had a very different journey to becoming supportive of medication. But on the blog, there will be some people that didn't have such a good experience. So if you want to read that, just to give yourself the pros and cons, I think that's really important. If you don't have my book, The Ultimate Guide to School and Home, I must say, doing preparation for the podcast, I thought, oh, I'll go back and look what I wrote in that book. And I'm like, Anna Tullemans and I have included so many things in this book. It's like crazy. No wonder it's the bestseller and why people come up to me and go, I've got your book with the key on it. I use it all the time. So if you don't have that book, that might be something you want to add to your professional library this year. I'll link to it in the blog page. But The Ultimate Guide to School and Home, it's just got so many gems in it. And it's really nice to go back and revisit it, actually. I got it out again. I'm like, oh, I forgot all these things are in there. I highly recommend you have a look at that book if you don't have it already. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to have Nikki on the podcast to share her experience as a parent about medication. So, Nikki, just tell us a little bit of your experience with medication.
Yeah, sure. So I have two kids. I have Ollie, who's recently turned 14. He was diagnosed on the autism spectrum at around 3.5, but wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until much later. So probably almost 3 years ago. And so obviously that's when it occurred to me and a pediatrician at the time that medication could be something we could use to assist him. He has lots of anxiety, can get stressed very easily about the little things, as we all know kids on the spectrum can. And so that's when we started, probably 2-3 years ago, our path on medication with him. And we've tried many and given them a good go, and finally kind of have got to the point where we're happy with what we're sort of using at the moment to help Ollie. He's recently started high school last year. So we wanted to try and have all our ducks in a row and be in the right place for him to be able to concentrate and listen and be attentive at school. So that's kind of when we started. Do you want me to talk about what we've tried?
What I'm interested, because I think when we're trying medication, one of the things in my books is I like people to keep a diary because it's hard to you forget how things change. It can sort of be like the frog in water. But what sort of things were you looking for when you'd go, this isn't for us? Like, what were the things you were observing?
Yeah, well, I guess the first medication we tried was Ritalin, which is obviously a very well-known medication that lots of people are on. I guess just from my perspective as a parent, I'm willing to give most things a go because I feel like there's not one size fits all in this case. And so I'm always very willing to try things, give them a good go, and then decide, yes, that worked for us, that didn't. And so that's kind of my perspective on it. It was a little taken back when I was sort of asked about medication for Ollie because it hadn't been something I'd thought we would ever do. I don't know. I wasn't against it. I wasn't for it, but it's hard as a parent, I think, when you're suddenly presented with this option and you suddenly go, well, how long is he going to be on them for? What's that going to do to him? What are the side effects? And so it certainly wasn't something we took lightly, but I guess always the heart is this going to help Ollie in environments where he struggles? And so I guess just as a kind of...
I think that's really important. And I think I'm very much the same. You've just got to try things and rule them out. And there isn't one size fit. It's a big spectrum. Autism is a big spectrum.
Huge.
Yeah.
And some things work for some families and some things don't for others. And that's okay. But I think my take is what will work from Ollie, and let's give it a go. And so I guess what I was looking for was for him to just have a little bit of space to be able to, he's a bright kid and he's in a mainstream school, but he finds it incredibly stressful. And I guess the big thing for us was sleep, improved sleep at night, but also just de-escalating some of those big feelings he has around stress and anxiety. And so Ritalin was the first one we tried. And actually for us, it was a nightmare. All of his sensory processing, he flaps and he paces and he rocks. All of that seemed to actually increase on the medication. And so very quickly, and I tried to give it a go. Some of the medications you have to build up on, and some of them, obviously, you would know, it's meant to be instant. And I've been worked in education for 6 years. I know when they work, they can be amazing, and teachers will tell you they see can see a big difference in concentration and behavior. But Ritalin for us was a big no. Yes.
Yeah. And what you're describing, it's funny. It's the sensors that get thrown for my kids with Ritalin. I've seen it so many times. And that's why we have to look for that, and looking that, like, I've had children who even regulating the internal. So being really hungry and starting to take food out of people's lunchboxes because they're starving. But that's the interoception. Like it's not just external. And interesting you said about the sleep. And I get Ritalin often is where people start, but it's not normally where they finish. So where did you?
So next, I figured out pretty quickly that wasn't our bag. So we canned that one. I think we went to the doctor and we tried Intuniv, which is actually a blood pressure medication.
I've not heard of it. Yeah.
It's not a stimulant, but it is. The big issue with this one is you have to build up your dosage. So we actually got a blood pressure machine because when Ollie started, he started on just 1 milligram. And again, all of these medications we've tried were to try and help with concentration, improve focus, decreasing some of the impulsive. And not that those things matter in the home environment, but when you are in school, obviously we want to be loving all of our children in those ways. But for Ollie, he wants to learn, he wants to do well. And so it was all about trying in those environments to help him be the best version he could be, to learn and to take in information and to retain it. So in Intuniv, all of these things were aimed at, so the end game is the same. In Intuniv, we had to build up slowly. So we started on 1 milligram. The big issue with this, because it is a blood pressure medication, it can actually have his blood pressure dropped up and down over the time. So we didn't have to take him to the doctor or anything. We just had to keep a close eye. And so we did buy blood pressure what are they called? I can't remember.
I know.
You know what I mean?
We'll call it a machine.
And so we would just make sure we were checking that regularly. And then we slowly increased the dosage. I found it was interesting. We got up to 4 milligram, which is, I think, the most you can have with this. And then, as any good parent, forgot to give it to him for a day or two, and really noticed actually that we'd lost him a little bit. His personality, he's got a great sense of humor. It took me back. And so I decided then to lower the dosage because we'd just lost a little bit of who he was and that was never the aim, because we love who we
I had that with my students where I say they just feel a bit zombie to me, and the humor's a big one, or just not so responsive. That is how I describe it.
Yeah. And that was we love who he is, and so we slowly reduced back to 2 milligram, and with that we tried just the Intuniv, and then we introduced risperidone as well in the evenings. He often doesn't have an issue going to sleep, but from a young child, he was always up ridiculously early. And he's become a teen now, so I think just by default, he's sleeping in a little more. But that was to sort of help him have prolonged sleep. So that was really good.
On that, because that is such an issue, and something a lot of teachers don't realize, that some of my kids, by the time they get to school at 9 o'clock, they've been awake for a long time. So what would have been the average time he woke up?
Well, for many, many years, probably it's improved. I would say maybe he's 14 now. Probably the last 2-3 years has been much better. But as a young fellow, 5 a.m. easy most days, occasionally earlier than that. And so 5 o'clock, definitely.
Yeah.
Obviously, the medication has helped, but I think naturally with all the hormones and becoming a teenager, it's certainly improved and is more 6:37.
Wow.
It's not often.
Look at you.
It's not often longer than that, but occasionally. And so just to give people hope that it can get better. And but it was many years of very early o'clock.
Yeah, but it's nice for other parents to hear that, because sometimes you feel like you're on your own with that. And I remember when my son was really little, and he's never been a great sleeper. He's not on the spectrum, but he's just always been a different sleeper. Never liked a nap in the day. He's just a very busy boy. And I rang like the Tricillian, like
yes, tick, did that. Anybody, just help me.
And I'm like, he's up at 5 a.m. every day. And they're like, really? Is that really a problem? But my daughter had always slept till 7. So it was like, well, yes, he's up at 5
because she does this. And it's a bit rough because it's not just that they wake up early. For me, there was many battles during the day. So you're also now exhausted from the start. And you're also dealing with all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's a compound effect on everything. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So then, so you stayed on the 2 meals and added in the concerta, risperidone, the slow release risperidone?
Yeah, and yes. The big thing with risperidone is because my doctor was very positive about risperidone. I'm thinking, well, why didn't you give me this in the first place?
Yeah.
But there's a big issue with weight gain, or can be. So risperidone, like a considerable, for some children, they can put on quite a lot of weight in a short amount of time. For Ollie, that was not. So that was where her hesitancy, I guess, was in prescribing that earlier. So I think we started off on 0.25 at night, and we're now up to 0.75. So it's not a lot, but he notices it if he hasn't had it. And the top tip for parents is don't give your child their morning medication before bed, which is to keep them alert and awake. Because I did make that mistake one time, and it wasn't great. But anyway, I'm trying to teach him to also take some responsibility. If mommy tries to give you that one, say no, mom.
Yeah, I love it.
The wrong one. But risperidone is something we are still on. But then we switched from Intuniv to Vyvanse, and that is what we're on now. So again, it's a time release stimulant. I guess there are some concerns it is an amphetamine, and so some people, I guess again, each to their own. But we seem to have found a good level. And actually, funnily enough, he's just gone back into year 8, and so starting school is always a little bit of a question mark emotionally. And he said yesterday he was on a slightly lower dose because of just doctor's appointments and trying to find a new pediatrician. So we haven't got the crossover yet. So we've just had a lower dosage to what he's used to left over until we see the pediatrician. And he said he noticed yesterday that he was just feeling really tired, which I think is actually his way of saying my brain wasn't operating in the capacity I'm used to. So probably more of a fogginess than maybe a slightly increased inability to zone in. So he's now older and able to express how it makes him feel. And he forgot it this morning. And it's hard as a parent because I was willing to turn the car around. I was willing to drop it off. But A, he wanted to get to school. B, he has to learn now that he's also responsible to think about those things. And then C, he didn't want me to come and hand it over to the learning support teacher because he doesn't want people to know, that. And not that you have to be ashamed of that, but I have to respect his boundaries around what he's comfortable
a teenager. He doesn't want his mum at school, and you know what? That's okay. Yeah,
it's totally okay.
No knocking on the door, no walking into class. So
I just respected the boundary. I just tried to not make a big deal of it. And so what'll be interesting is tonight when he comes home and if he's noticed how he's feeling, because I think as they get older and they can use their expressive language to let you know how they feel and let you know how it works for them, is really great as a parent because you can take that into consideration. And if something's no longer working, then you can readdress it and talk to the doctor about it.
Absolutely. But this is why I really am pleased to do this podcast, because it also, sometimes parents don't know what to ask, what they're looking for. And really, the fact that Ollie can now say, well, I felt like that. I mean, I suspect having to concentrate all day after being on holidays is a really hard thing without your meds being at the right point, which is often why parents say, in the holidays, they don't seem to need to take as much. Well, that's because we're not focusing on 80 people in the corridor.
Yeah. I've got all these new teachers. For him, being in relationship and people understanding who he is deeply important to him.
Yes.
And so I think always the start of the year, new teachers, do they know me? Are they going to, he's a very sensitive little man, and just trying to hope that, so there's a lot going on, right? And so having the meds right is really important. So it's probably not ideal that we're in between.
But
pediatricians.
That's going to happen, and that's
life.
The reality of it. And I that's why I love having you on to share your experience, because changing pediatricians, teenage, they start growing, they have a growth spurt, which means often just that change in hormones and all of those things impact. And that's where we've got to be constantly observing and changing, and one size doesn't fit all. So I really get that. I really get that. Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important. I've got several friends with kids with ADHD, autism, and on different medications and stuff. And they've all been through probably at least 2 or 3 trials of different ones. And I think it can be a scary process thinking about having your child on medication. And as I said, at the root for us as a family is always, is this going to significantly help him be the best version of himself? And that's not to say that the stimming and all of those things, we're so used to that. We don't care if he does that, right? It's not about eliminating or whatever any of those behaviors, because it's part of his package and who he is, and we love him for the way that it is. But also, we've chose to send him to a mainstream school, and he wants to do well and wants to learn and loves learning. And in order for him to do that to the best of his ability, that's why we've kind of ended up. And he's seeing that now, right? As a kid able to express his, and I mean, he could when he was younger, but especially now at 14, he's able to express it impacts him and his day if he hasn't had it. And who knows what the future holds for that and how long it will be. But I think certainly for Steve, for school, that this will be something, will continue this journey, I think.
It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not everything. And that's one of the struggles I have often when people go, oh, some people if jump in, will get medication. It's like, that's not going to be the only tool in the toolbox. You've got to have a lot of tools in that toolbox, and medication's one of them, but it can take a long time to get right, and it's not an easy fix. And as you've just said, it takes a journey, and then it needs constantly adjusting. It's not just like, boom, done. It's much more complex than that. But I agree. As a teacher, I've seen the kids who put on weight really fast and you're like, whoa, this isn't good. I've seen the kids who fall asleep. And this is why we need to work together too, because school is different to home in what we're seeing. But I think what my experience is what Ollie's saying, that he feels different on it and he feels better and able to achieve what he wants to achieve. And that's amazing, that we can offer that.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate that. And thank you for sharing your willing to come on after I did a shout out on Facebook, because I was just really keen, just because there is a lot of hesitancy and a lot of misunderstanding. And I think you giving a voice to it, I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was absolute pleasure chatting to you. Always, anytime.
Thank you so much. I am super excited to have Naomi here to share her experience as a parent and a teacher. And she is just taking on a new adventure of having an autism class. So she's going to bring a wealth of experience of understanding and medication. And look, the thing about medication, everyone's different, but I'd love to know, what's your experience of medication?
So I guess before I had my own kids, I was probably of the thought that kids don't need medication. It's their behavior, it's the parents, and how quickly things change when it directly affects your own life.
Yeah.
And I guess being a teacher and a mum now, that there is no black or white answer. There is such a big grey area, because every child is different and every medication affects kids differently. So I have seen the fors and against, and I must admit that the fors, they are higher, especially if your team or your child's team is all working together. The teacher, the parent, and the pediatrician or psychologist, whomever is prescribing the medication. I'm very lucky because my daughter Gabrielle, she has a fantastic team. We have a pediatrician who just trusts me 100%, and he always says, you know her the best. What do you want to do? And once he's given me the medical information and background, he lets me then make the choice, which is fantastic, because then I feel that I can then pass that information on to other parents too, that it doesn't have to be just this, the doctor said they have to have the medication and so that's what we're going to do, or I don't believe in medication, so I'm not going to do that. I feel that I can give people the fors and against and let them then make their choice.
Yeah. So tell me, when you're talking for and against, what are just sort of dot points that you're looking for when you're doing that?
So I guess when my daughter was diagnosed with anxiety first, and she was going to be put on fluoxetine for her anxiety, my husband, who I'm happily married with, we co-parent, we're all together, but he didn't have the same understanding. And even though we are together, we sort of take our own lanes. He has his responsibilities and I have mine. So it was my responsibility to be taking Gabrielle to birthday parties and to swimming lessons and all of those things. So he wasn't seeing the reaction that we were getting from that. So when it was time to talk about maybe medicating for her anxiety, he was very, no, we can't do that. She's this beautiful little girl. Anyway, we shouldn't be giving her medication. And then that confused me because he was this person that I trust most in the world, but I was thinking, I don't know that I agree with you. So the more research I did and looked into it, I said to him, if she had leukemia, you wouldn't think twice to give her a medication that was going to make her feel better. And he said, you're right. I didn't think of it like that. So I guess there's this stigma behind it that we need to get rid of. And I think sometimes parents, they just need to go to understand that it's okay, that the medication is going to help, even though you might think that it's not the best choice to make for a little person.
You just made all the hairs stand up on my arm. So I think what you shared there is so important for parents and teachers to hear sometimes, because my experience is mum and dad aren't always on the same page at the same time, even if they're together. And my husband, myself, absolutely the same at times. But what makes it harder when you have a neurodiverse child is it's not always black and white. And I like the way you described, you were seeing her in different situations. So you were coming to it from a different perspective, whereas your husband wasn't seeing that. And honestly, sometimes that can be home and school too.
Yes,
I see a different child at school to what the parents are seeing. And I'm saying, hey, how about medication? They're like, no. And I love that. And I feel that if your child needs an asthma spray, I often say that. Would you do it? And the other kids get it, by the way. So I love that. Yeah. But I also like the way that you did your research and then you sort of had to talk your husband through it. And this is so important that we remember. And often you both don't go to those appointments either.
That's exactly
busy
right.
with jobs. It's very hard for both parents to get to every appointment. So I love that.
Yeah. And it's the same, I guess, if you're talking ADHD and talking to parents about medicating for that. I think for so long, people have thought kids that have ADHD are the naughty kids, and the behaviours that come with that are because they're naughty. And Ritalin has always been the preferred medication, and the side effects for it are very well known. And people don't want their children to not want to eat or to be not responsive because the medication is affecting them so much. But I think that if we can let parents know, well, you have the choice. You don't have to use Ritalin. There are so many other options around, but that the medication that they're giving them is going to help, what I like to say, take the edge off.
Yes.
It's not going to stop the behaviours because that's not ADHD. That's just something that might come with it from being frustrated or tired or not understanding. So with Gabrielle, we went through 3 different medications until we found the one that was right. And I think parents don't know that they can do that either, because she was diagnosed with anxiety first and then the ADHD and then autism. One of the side effects of Ritalin was anxiety.
Yes. She didn't need any more anxiety. Yeah, I've seen that.
No.
We've got enough anxiety. We don't need to add any more to this.
That's right. I was like, I can put up with her looking in the fridge for a bowl. The anxiety. We just this little girl that was just so sad and so confused. I said, we can't deal with that. So then I think it was Intuitive that we went to second. And
I don't think I know that one. What's that?
I think it's Intuitive or something like that. It's not one that's very well known, and it's a non-stimulant 2, and it's a slow release. And she got really bloated and puffy, and then that started to affect her self-confidence. And again, I said, nope,
Yeah.
We don't want this one. So we ended up on Stratera, which again is a non-stimulant, slow releasing. So she only has the 2 lots of 18 milligram in the morning, and it gets her through the day. It doesn't suppress her appetite. She can concentrate. Teachers notice a difference straight away. Now that she's 13, she goes straight from school to dancing, and sometimes I don't see her until 6 o'clock at night. And yes, she's tired and she's had, her cup is very overfull and she needs time to herself to get herself regulated. But she could still do homework if she needed to. She can still tell me about her day. And we sort of got to the end of year 7 and the pediatrician said, sometimes teenagers, we don't need to carry on the medication. And I went into a little bit of meltdown myself, which is very selfish because it's not about me, it's about her, because I didn't want things to change. I felt if it's not broken, let's not fix it.
Yeah.
But again, Gabrielle's team is full of people that are so helpful. So we got observations not just from the school, but from her psychologist and from her dance school and from her music therapist, so that I could provide the pediatrician with not just my opinion. These people see her at all different stages of the day. I'm seeing her at the end.
Yeah.
And I didn't want my needs to be what was more important. It had to be about. And once he read them, he said, yes, you're right. We're going to continue with this until most puberty has happened, and we don't want things, she's turning 14 and 15, to be out of her control. That's going to be hard enough as it is. And he listened to me, and I felt good about that.
Yeah, no. And I think we have to put everything in this big perspective of, especially because our girls are so good at masking.
Yeah.
And I don't know your daughter, but I mean, pretty much often we have to look across the whole day with the girls, because they might hold it together all day at dance and school, but when they get home, the amount of time they need to regulate or the way they answer, these are all important things to look at. And I don't care what anyone says. A mother's gut feels normally pretty spot on, and you can collect all the evidence you like. So often I say to parents, what's your gut saying? Because there's something there that, like, your spidery senses, whatever you want to call it, where you go, yeah, no, I don't want to just take her off. We need to look at this and review it and not rush into these decisions. And I think that's so important. I love that. What about the students in your class? Have you had kids who you go, oh, wow, big difference?
Yes, I have. And I mean, I haven't really come into a situation where someone else has done all the hard work and then I've seen the child on medication going, wow, that's a difference. I guess my experience has been more trying to help parents get their children diagnosed, and then what happens after that. And then pretty much after that year, I wave them on and I don't see them after that.
No.
But I do always say, I'm only an email away. Please let me know if I can help. So we had a little boy who had been diagnosed with ADHD, and the behaviours that we're showing at school were very different to the behaviours at home. So at school, I guess coming from having a child with autism, our classroom routine was the same every day. Even though I only worked 3 days a week, on the crossover days, my team teacher, we were both very similar. So the routine was very strict. He was achieving. We could provide him with what he needed. He was holding it together for us, and he would get home, and the person that mum saw was a totally different kid. So getting his school reports or having parent-teacher interviews, she was like, oh my gosh, this is not the same person.
Yeah.
So we helped her along finding a pediatrician, writing the observation letters, having the school counsellor come in and do observations as well. And so he was diagnosed with ADHD, but it was decided that he wouldn't go on medication because he could get through school, and that was what was most important. It wasn't interfering with his learning.
Yeah.
And we had actually had this little boy in kindergarten and year 1, so we knew him very well. He knew the expectations, and he was going along fabulously. And I think the mum thought in the back of her head, well, I've got this in my pocket if I need it for the following year, because having the same teachers for 2 years, throw him out that next year. But as the year continued and he had a growth spurt and all of these things were happening, you could see the signs, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
we might need to review this a little bit earlier than first thought.
And you have to constantly keep looking at that. And kinder year 1, the amount of concentration, teachers tend to break it down, slow it down, use a lot of visuals. But I always say by year 2, a lot of inferred meaning, less direct instruction,
Yes.
more flexibility, more group work, longer on task. This is where often for our ADHD kids, the executive functioning shows up because there's just so much more going on from year 2.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so I guess I got to see that side of it, which I've never really seen before, to then have to make or help the mum make that decision. I think you might need to trial it. And I think that threw her a little bit too, because I think in her head, she was like, no, we're going to get through the whole year. And then if we need to trial it, we will. So she decided, yes, that we would trial it. And the pediatrician actually asked that he have his blood pressure taken at school, which I had never heard of.
Wow. I've not heard that either.
No.
I love doing this podcast interviews. I learn heaps. This is like professional development.
Yeah, so I brought my little blood pressure machine in, and he would go off to the sick bay at 11 o'clock every day to have his blood pressure taken, and we recorded that for the pediatrician and sent it along to the next appointment. But I also then was there the day that he started his medication, and I actually thought, oh, what have we done? I actually was a little scared or afraid that I'd made the wrong decision, or I've told this mum the wrong information.
What was making you feel that?
So he said, my heart's going too fast. And he was all clammy and pale. He had to lay down for about an hour. But after the second day, it went away. And so he was on Ritalin, and I guess it was just his body's way of working out what is this different thing inside of me. And then in the back of my head, I thought, oh, is he going to lose that sparkly personality that comes along with kids with ADHD? But he didn't. And after a week, it was just amazing to see him getting his writing finished and putting his hand up and answering questions. Maths, like after recess, when the day was getting further along. Yeah, so it was beautiful in the end to see how much he could achieve once the busyness had gone away. Yeah.
I had a little boy once do a little picture, and he went, before my medication, and he like scribbled all over the page. It was just the most gorgeous little boy. And they said, when I have my medication, and he put these like clear dots on the page. And honestly, that's what it was like for him. Before, it was just chaos in his brain. And once we had the medication, it was like clarity of a small dot. And I'm like, I get that, because I see that. I see that for you before, trying to get to the mat and everyone moving, and just it would be overwhelming chaos. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I can sit. I can listen. I can. And imagine that. Imagine how exhausting it was for them when they can't. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. I really, really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing both as a parent and as a professional, because I think that's really helpful, because teachers, we are not trained in medication, any of this stuff. I mean, it's why in my ultimate guide, I got the page out that Anna Tullemans and I wrote with all the different drugs as a reminder to myself and what they do, because we don't learn any of this. And often we just get a note from a doctor asking, you're like, well, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, or I don't know what I'm looking for. Give me some more direction.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate your time and putting your hand up to come on a chair.
My pleasure.
I am super excited to have Chris on the podcast. So, Chris, your son asked to go on medication. Just tell me about that.
He did. So he was 10 by then, and it'd been suggested to us since he was about 4 by different therapists. And we have to say we held off. We weren't keen to that to be our first go-to. In hindsight, I kind of wish we'd done it earlier. By 10, he was doing half days of school. The school was sending him home. He was in trouble every day. He got sent to the principal's office. And he would say to me, because he's got ADHD as well as ASD, and he'd say to me, Mum, I'd sit down and the teacher would get everyone to sit on the mat, and he would say, I'm not going to yell out. I'm not going to yell out. But he's impulsive. He's got ADHD, so he would. So he said, I want to try medication. And I said, okay. So he started taking Ritalin, and from the very first day, he said, "I can think clearly, Mum. I didn't realize I've been thinking through a fog all this time." And when he went to school, he said he would still think about yelling out, but this time when he could stop himself, and before he couldn't. So he'd be like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going to yell out. I'm not going to yell out. And then of course he would like yell out. And then he went, and he gets sent to the principal's office, and he was all down on himself. And he said, now when I try to stop myself from yelling out, I can. And I don't get in trouble as much anymore. And that was 2 years ago. And he is the happiest thing. His last report said he's a pleasure to teach. They weren't saying that 2 years ago, I can tell you. And he's loving school. He's helping other kids. He's getting up and doing his presentations. He's engaged, top mark on every level at school. And we were about to take him out and work out what we do now. I know medication is not for everyone, and it's not something I talk a lot about actually. But my experience for him was that I'm really glad that we tried it. And when he said, I just want to try it, Mum, because if I try it, because he asked the psychologist, he asked all the questions. He said, is it addictive? Will I be able to stop if I don't like it? And she said, look, it's a short acting. If you do it once and don't like it, you need never take it again. And he said, I want to try it because then I'll know.
Amazing. And has he stayed on the same Ritalin?
No.
Some children swap to Concerta and other things.
He's on Concerta now. So he was taking 10 milligrams of Ritalin in the morning and 10 milligrams at lunchtime. And he was getting some headaches and a few other things. And we worked out he needs to eat more breakfast. And we were navigating that. But he's now on 18 milligrams of Concerta in the morning. And he's been doing that for quite a while now. And it's fine. He just takes that before. He doesn't even take it at school. He has breakfast. He takes it. And he said he can feel it coming in and he just feels he's calmer, clearer. And I know that it's just what I know about ADHD is it's a physical condition and it needs a physical solution. People think it's behavioral or whatever, but it's about the chemical that's missing in his brain. And it just puts that chemical back in. All that does for him is level the playing field. And then so for the 2 years that he's been on medication, all the therapies we did before that, I feel weren't really landing. And the other therapies we've done since, occupational therapy and psychology, he's been able to access therapy so much better. And his life, is amazing today.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really think hearing from a parent that hesitation, and even the fact you said, I don't share it with a lot of people, it is a vulnerable thing to put your child on medication. So I really love that. But I just want to say your son had a voice to say it. I work with a lot of children who don't have communication skills to say it. So I would ask that parents remember that maybe give it a try, even if your child doesn't have the words to ask for it, because as we just heard, take them off it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But give it, I always think be eclectic. And if you are getting your son was crying for help, ending up in the principal's office every day, all these things are indicators that that's just communication in a different way. And the teachers not having tools in their toolbox to help. As you said, the therapy's hit once he had the medication. So maybe that sort of can just inspire parents to give it a go. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
That's right. He's literally not been to the principal's office, I would say not once in 2 years, not once.
Wow.
And I'm not kidding, he was there every day. Every day I was, that phone call from the school, the email, here we go. And so you just know. And in the end, they said 11:30. Before lunch, you pick him up every day. We're only keeping him till 11:30. And because I just watched the light go out in his eyes, and he's always loved school, and he loves school again.
Yeah.
And he started crying in the mornings and didn't want to go, and he hated being in trouble, and he literally hasn't been in trouble. I picked him up from school camp yesterday, and I said, "How'd you go on camp?" He said, "Good." I said, "You get in trouble, Mitch?" Nope, didn't get in trouble. Camp used to be the worst thing.
Of course,
because
every team.
There was a while that he was a bit anxious about going on camp, and he still got in trouble in the last one. He's been on a couple camps now about getting in trouble. He's not happy to go. His life turned around. It really did.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies from this podcast. If you enjoy learning with me, I highly recommend you think about doing a course this year. Not only do I have courses by me, I have them with people with a lived experience, Temple Grandin, Dean Beadle, or other educators like Laura Kirby on PDA. I have a wealth of courses that'll make a difference to you. So make sure you check out all my online courses because you can learn online, anywhere, anytime, in a place that suits you, at a speed that suits you. So check out all the online courses that are available to make a difference to you and the children you know.